Right now, on the other side of the world, there is an ocean so large that every continent on Earth could fit inside it, and there would still be room left over. It covers more than half the planet's surface. It is deeper in places than the tallest mountains are tall. It has been here for 200 million years, and tonight, in the dark, we are going to go all the way in. If this kind of story is how you end your nights, please subscribe right now so you never miss one. Hit the like button, it helps more than you know, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you are and what time it is there. We love knowing who is out there with us. Now, let's go to the water. Stand at the edge of the Pacific Ocean at night, and what you feel before anything else is the scale. Not in a way that can be measured or explained, in a way that arrives in the body before the mind has processed it. The darkness of the water is different from the darkness of a room or a field or a forest. It is active darkness, moving darkness. It breathes. The sound of it arrives in low, rolling intervals that do not stop and have not stopped for as long as there has been a Pacific Ocean and a shoreline for the waves to reach. The Pacific covers approximately 165 million square kilometers. This number is too large to hold in the mind directly. To approach it differently, the Pacific is wider than the Moon is far away from Earth. It contains more than half of all the free water on the surface of the planet. Every other ocean on Earth, the Atlantic, the Indian, the Arctic, and the Southern, could be poured into the Pacific Basin, and it would not be full. It is the oldest of the major ocean basins, its floor carrying rocks that have been on the seafloor for 200 million years in some places. It was old when the first fish appeared. It was old when the first land plants grew. The Pacific has been here through everything the Earth has been through, receiving the rivers that drained the ancient continents, holding the water that fell as rain on landscapes that no longer exist, cycling that water through depths so cold and dark and still, that the same water molecules may not see the surface again for 1,000 years. And yet, the surface tonight is moving, always moving. The waves crossing the water in long, slow sets that began as wind somewhere far out in the open ocean. Days ago, perhaps, are in a different hemisphere, and have been travelling since then, rising and falling through the water column, carrying their energy across thousands of kilometers of open sea to arrive, finally, here, at this shore, at this moment, at this sound. The wave breaks and pulls back, and the next one comes, and there is nothing about this rhythm that asks for your attention or your interpretation. It does not mean anything. It is simply what the ocean does, what it has always done, what it will continue doing long after every human who has ever stood at its edge is gone. This is the biggest quiet on Earth, not silence. The Pacific is never silent, but quiet in the sense that the sound of it has no urgency, no demand, no message. It is sound that asks nothing of you. The low rolling arrival of water on shore, over and over, at the pace that wind and distance and the physics of deep water wave propagation have set for it. A pace you cannot hurry and would not want to. We are going into this ocean tonight, all the way down, through everything it holds, and everything it knows, and everything it has been. The water is dark and very deep and extraordinarily old, and there is nowhere else on Earth you need to be. The water you are looking at is old in a way that is difficult to properly feel. Not old, the way a tree is old, or a mountain, or a building whose stones were laid by people whose names have been forgotten. Old in the way that water has no fixed form, no fixed location, no attachment to any one place or any one time. The water molecule that breaks on this shore tonight may have been rain over a forest that no longer exists. It may have passed through the body of an animal extinct for 50 million years. It may have been locked in a glacier during an ice age and released when the ice retreated. It has been ice and rain and river and cloud and ocean and ice again, cycling through the Earth's water system in the slow, continuous loop that has been running since there was water on this planet at all. But the age of the water in the deep Pacific is a different kind of old entirely. Oceanographers measure the age of deep ocean water by tracking certain chemical signatures, particularly the ratio of carbon isotopes and the concentration of dissolved oxygen that change in predictable ways once a water mass sinks below the surface and loses contact with the atmosphere. From these measurements, they have established that the oldest water in the Pacific Deep, sitting in the basins of the North Pacific, pressed down by the weight of kilometers of ocean above it, has not touched the surface in roughly 1,000 years. Some estimates push that figure higher. The water at the very bottom of the deepest Pacific trenches may not have seen open air since before the first European cathedrals were built. This water descended from the surface near the poles, where cold temperatures and high salinity made it dense enough to sink. Once it sank, it moved, slowly, almost imperceptibly slowly, along the ocean floor, following the deep topography of the basin, spreading across the abyssal plain at speeds of millimeters per second. It has been traveling in the dark at that pace ever since. Think about what has happened on the surface of the Earth while that water has been in the deep. Empires rose and fell. Languages were born and died. Entire civilizations that seemed permanent and central to the world they inhabited disappeared so completely that we know them only through fragments, pottery, bones, traces in the sediment. All of that time, the water in the deep Pacific has been doing what deep ocean water does, moving slowly toward the place where the great ocean circulation will eventually bring it back to the surface, where it will warm and rise and become part of the atmosphere again. Rain, river, cloud. The surface of the Pacific tonight is in constant exchange with the atmosphere above it. Gases dissolving in and out, water evaporating, heat transferring. But a few meters down, the exchange slows. A few hundred meters down, the water has been cut off from the surface for years. A few thousand meters down, for centuries. The ocean is not one thing. It is a stack of worlds, each older and darker and quieter than the one above it, each moving at its own pace, each on its own timescale that has nothing to do with the hours and days and years that structure human life. There is something genuinely calming about this, the pace of deep water, the 1,000-year journey in the dark, the complete indifference of the ocean to the urgency of the world above it. Whatever happened today, whatever felt pressing and necessary and consuming, is not happening 1,000 meters below the surface of the Pacific. Down there, the only thing happening is the slow, cold, ancient movement of water through the dark, moving at millimeters per second, moving as it has moved for all of recorded human history and long before. The surface shifts and catches the faint light. Below it, the old water moves. It is in no hurry. It has never been in a hurry. The Pacific is blue. Everyone knows this. It is one of the first facts the mind produces about the ocean. Vast, blue, blue, all the way to the horizon and beyond. And this is true, in the way that most simple facts about complex things are true. Accurate as far as it goes, and not nearly as complete as the thing it describes. The Pacific is not one blue, it is hundreds. In the open ocean, far from any coast, in water more than 1,000 meters deep and perfectly clear of sediment, the Pacific is a blue so deep it is almost violet, a color that has no real equivalent on land, a blue that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. That looks less like a color and more like the visual experience of depth itself. This is the clearest water on Earth. The open Pacific in the subtropical gyres, the slow-turning rings of current that sit at the center of the ocean north and south of the equator, is so lacking in nutrients that it supports almost no life, almost no plankton, almost nothing to cloud or color it. It is sometimes called the ocean desert, and its clarity is the clarity of emptiness. The blue of it is the blue of pure water, absorbing all the longer wavelengths of light. The reds, the oranges, the yellows, and returning only the short wavelength blues and violets to the eye. Near the coasts, the color changes, where rivers pour into the sea as the water carries sediment, fine particles of eroded rock and soil that scatter all wavelengths of light and turn the water brown or green or grey. Where cold, nutrient-rich water wells up from the deep, along the coasts of California, Peru, Japan, the sudden availability of nitrogen and phosphorus triggers blooms of phytoplankton, the microscopic plant-like organisms that are the base of the ocean food web. Phytoplankton contain chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is green. A bloom of phytoplankton turns the ocean green. A very large bloom, seen from a satellite, looks like someone poured green paint into the sea across thousands of square kilometers. And then there are the colors that have nothing to do with what is in the water and everything to do with what is above it. The Pacific at sunset is orange and red and gold, the water surface acting as a mirror for the sky, the color changing minute by minute as the sun drops. The Pacific at dawn is grey and silver, and the palest possible blue. The Pacific under a storm is the color of pewter, dark and featureless, the sky and the water merging at the horizon into a single dark grey world. Sailors learned to read these colors long before there were instruments to measure what they indicated. Green water meant nutrients, which meant fish. Brown water near a coast meant a river mouth, which meant fresh water and the danger of shoaling ground. Dark blue meant depth and safety. Grey-green under a certain kind of cloud meant a particular kind of weather coming. The color of the water was information, specific, reliable, readable by a practiced eye. In a world where information about what lay ahead could be the difference between safe passage and disaster. The color changes with the depth below the surface as well. Light penetrates the ocean selectively. Red wavelengths are absorbed within the first few meters. Orange disappears by 20 meters, yellow by 30. By 100 meters down, only blue and green light remain. By 200 meters, only the faintest blue. Below that, nothing. The colors of the shallow reef, the vivid reds and oranges of coral and fish, only appear that color in sunlight or torchlight. At depth, a red fish is black. The color was never in the fish. It was in the light. The surface of the Pacific tonight looks dark. all its blues reduced by the absence of the sun to the single, deep, undifferentiated dark of water under a night sky. But somewhere underneath it, very faintly, the blue is still there, waiting, as it always has, for the light to come back and show it. At the bottom of the Western Pacific, in a place called the Mariana Trench, there is a point on the ocean floor called Challenger Deep. It is the lowest known place on the surface of the Earth. If you were to take Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on land, its summit nearly 9 kilometers above sea level, and set it down on the floor of Challenger Deep, the peak of Everest would still be more than 2 kilometers below the surface of the ocean. The water column above the floor of the Challenger Deep is approximately 11 kilometers. 11 kilometers of ocean pressing down. And the pressure at that depth is more than 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. At the surface, the atmosphere pushes down on your body with a force of about 1 kilogram per square centimeter. A force so constant and so familiar that the body never registers it. At the bottom of Challenger Deep, the pressure is over 1,000 kilograms per square centimeter. A human body, unprotected, would be compressed to a fraction of its volume in seconds. The air spaces in the lungs, the sinuses, the middle ear, all of them would collapse instantly. There is no gradual adjustment. There is no threshold where the body could manage. The pressure at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is simply incompatible with the architecture of a human being. And yet, things live there. And the first humans to reach the bottom of Challenger Deep, Don Walsh and Jacques Picard, in a submersible called the Trieste in January 1960, reported seeing a flatfish on the seafloor. A fish living at 11 kilometers depth under 1,000 atmospheres of pressure, in water just above freezing, in complete darkness. This observation was disputed for years. Other scientists were not certain the animal they saw was actually a fish. But subsequent expeditions have confirmed that life at these depths is real, strange, and far more abundant than anyone expected. The creatures of the deepest Pacific trenches are adapted to conditions that would kill any surface organism almost instantly. Their cell membranes are composed of different lipids than surface organisms, more fluid, more flexible, or designed to function under pressures that would solidify the membranes of shallower animals. Some deep trench fish have no swim bladder, the gas-filled organ that most fish use for buoyancy control, because a gas space at this depth would be catastrophically compressed. Instead, they achieve neutral buoyancy through watery, gelatinous flesh, their bodies adapted to the pressure so completely that if you brought them to the surface, the pressure change would kill them just as surely as the depth would kill us. The amphipods, crustaceans, distantly related to the sandhoppers you find on beaches, are the most abundant animals in the Mariana Trench. They have been found in enormous numbers, swarming over any organic material that sinks to the floor, their bodies pale and translucent in the lights of submersible cameras. They are scavengers, feeding on the slow rain of dead organic matter that sinks from the surface world above. Particles of dead plankton, fecal pellets, the occasional larger carcass of a whale or fish that has sunk all the way to the bottom. The deep Pacific trenches receive this material on a timescale of weeks from when it dies at the surface. The amphipods are patient. They wait. In 2012, filmmaker James Cameron descended to the floor of Challenger Deep alone in a specially designed submersible and described the seafloor as flat, almost featureless, a pale sediment surface in every direction. The water absolutely still. No current, no movement. The submersible's lights illuminating a few meters of ancient grey sediment. And beyond that, complete darkness. He was 11 kilometers below the surface of the Pacific Ocean. He was further from the sunlight above him than most aeroplanes fly above the ground. He was, in a very real sense, at the bottom of the world. And it was quiet. The ocean breathes, not in the way a living creature breathes, not with lungs or gills, not with the rhythm of inhalation and exhalation that characterizes biological respiration, but in a way that is slower and larger, and, in its own terms, just as complete. The ocean moves heat and cold and gases and nutrients around the planet in a continuous, globe-spanning circulation that oceanographers call the thermohaline circulation, a name built from the Greek words for heat and salt, because those are the two forces that drive it. It works like this. In the far north of the Pacific and the Atlantic, the surface water is cold, colder than almost anywhere else on the ocean's surface. A cold water is dense, and in these polar and subpolar regions, the surface water is also salty, because the formation of sea ice removes fresh water from the ocean and leaves the salt behind. Dense water sinks. The cold, salty surface water of the North Atlantic and the Southern Ocean drops. Slowly, but with enormous momentum, the weight of vast volumes of water descending. And as it sinks, it creates a deficit at the surface that draws warmer water from the tropics northward to replace it. This warm surface flow is the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic. In the Pacific, the circulation is less dramatic, but no less real. The sinking water spreads across the ocean floor. It moves at a pace that makes the word slow seem inadequate. A few centimeters per second at most, sometimes much less. It fills the deep basins of the ocean, one cold degree at a time, pressing older water ahead of it, pushing it along the floors of the world's ocean basins, in currents too slow to feel but too large to ignore. The deep Pacific fills with cold bottom water that entered the ocean near Antarctica, the densest water on Earth, and has been moving northward through the deep since it sank. Eventually, after centuries of travel through the dark, this deep water upwells. It rises back toward the surface in certain regions, where the shape of the ocean floor, the direction of winds, and the rotation of the Earth combine to bring deep water up, along the coasts of California and Peru, in the Antarctic circumpolar current, in the equatorial Pacific. When it rises, it brings with it the nutrients it has been accumulating during its long journey through the dark: nitrogen, phosphorus, silica, iron. And these nutrients feed the phytoplankton blooms that feed the small animals, that feed the fish, that feed everything else. The thermohaline circulation is the reason the ocean is livable for most of the life that lives in it. Without it, the deep ocean would be a nearly lifeless abyss, its waters stagnant and anoxic. With it, the deep is continuously refreshed, oxygenated water reaching into the basins, nutrients cycling from depth to surface and back. The circulation distributes heat around the planet, carrying warmth from the equator toward the poles and moderating the temperatures of coastal regions that would otherwise be far colder. The mild climate of Western Europe, the navigability of the North Atlantic, the particular ecosystems of the Pacific coast, all of these are downstream effects of the thermohaline circulation doing what it does. One complete circuit of this global ocean conveyor take somewhere between 500 and 1,000 years. The water that is sinking in the North Atlantic tonight will not complete its journey through the deep Atlantic, around Antarctica, into the deep Pacific, up through the upwelling regions, across the surface, back to the sinking zone, until somewhere around the year 2,500 to 3,000. The ocean is running on a timetable that has nothing to do with human lifetimes or human planning horizons. It operates on the timescale of civilizations. The surface of the Pacific moves in waves that arrive and pass in seconds, and the thermohaline circulation moves in pulses that take centuries to develop and centuries more to resolve. Two timescales, one ocean, both of them in their own way, asking nothing of the body listening to them tonight except to slow down, just a little, just enough, and match for a few hours something closer to the rhythm of deep water. The ocean keeps its own time. It always has. Below the surface of the Pacific, at a depth between 200 and 1,000 meters, there is a zone that sunlight never fully reaches. It is called the mesopelagic zone, sometimes the twilight zone, and it is neither the bright, productive surface world nor the absolute dark of the deep ocean. It is the in-between, a place of perpetual dim blue fading to black, where the light is too weak to support photosynthesis, but not absent enough to call total darkness. This is the most inhabited zone of the ocean by total biomass of animal life. It is also the least understood, and much of what happens in it takes place in a daily rhythm so vast and so consistent that it may be the largest coordinated animal movement on Earth. Every night, the midnight zone rises, not the water, the animals in it. In the hours after dark, billions of small fish, crustaceans, squid, and jellyfish begin a vertical migration from the depths toward the surface. They ascend hundreds of meters over the course of the night, rising into the productive surface waters to feed on the phytoplankton and zooplankton there. Then, before dawn, they descend again, retreating into the cooler and darker water below before the daylight arrives and makes them visible to the predators that hunt by sight. This migration, up at night, down at dawn, every night, everywhere in the ocean, is called the Deal vertical migration, and it happens simultaneously across the entire Pacific and every other ocean basin on Earth. The scale of it is genuinely difficult to imagine. The total biomass of animals participating in this migration in the Pacific alone is estimated in the hundreds of millions of tons. Every night, this mass of life rises. Every dawn, it retreats. The daily movement of carbon from the surface world to the deep, carried in the bodies and fecal pellets of these migrating animals, is one of the most significant mechanisms by which the ocean sequesters carbon from the atmosphere. At the midnight zone is not just a place animals pass through. It is a critical part of how the planet manages its own chemistry, and it is full of light. Bioluminescence, the production of light by living organisms, is not a curiosity or a rarity in the deep ocean. It is the rule. More than 70% of deep-sea animals are estimated to produce their own light. The mechanisms vary. Some use a chemical reaction between a compound called luciferin and an enzyme called luciferase, the same basic chemistry used by fireflies on land, here deployed in total darkness at depths no sunlight has ever penetrated. Some animals produce steady glows, some produce flashes, some produce patterns of light along their bodies that allow recognition of their own species in the dark. Some use light as a lure, in hanging a bioluminescent organ on a modified fin spine, the anglerfish's famous fishing rod, to attract prey that mistakes the glow for something edible. The siphonophores, colonial organisms related to jellyfish that drift through the midwater in long chains that can reach 45 meters, produce waves of bioluminescent light that travel along their bodies when disturbed. The blue-white flash moving from one end of the chain to the other in a fraction of a second. A disturbed siphonophore in dark water looks like a string of lights being switched on and off very quickly. A moving, pulsing, 45-meter-long, living light display in the absolute darkness of the open ocean. The light these animals make is almost always blue or blue-green. This is not coincidence. Blue-green light travels furthest through seawater. It is the wavelength that penetrates deepest before being absorbed. The ocean has selected for the wavelength that works best in the ocean, across millions of years of evolution in the dark, arriving at the same answer independently in hundreds of different lineages. Blue-green, because blue-green travels, because blue-green reaches furthest through the water, toward whatever other animal might be close enough to see it. Below you, right now, in the dark waters of the Pacific, animals are making light. The ocean at night is not dark all the way through. It is dark at the surface, where you can see the stars, and lit far below by its own quiet fire. The Pacific Ocean is getting smaller, not quickly, not in any way that would be perceptible to a human lifetime or several human lifetimes stacked together, but measurably, verifiably, in the way that geological processes are measurable when you have instruments sensitive enough and patience long enough to detect them. The Pacific floor is being consumed at its edges, sliding beneath the surrounding continents and island arcs at a rate of a few centimeters per year. A few centimeters per year for 200 million years adds up to an ocean basin that has already shrunk considerably from its maximum extent, and will continue shrinking for millions of years more, until, in some unimaginably distant future, it may close entirely, as the Atlantic once closed, as the ocean that existed before the Pacific closed before that. The mechanism driving this is plate tectonics, and the Pacific Ocean floor is made of oceanic crust, dense, dark basaltic rock, heavier than the continental crust it butts up against at the ocean's edges. Where oceanic crust meets continental crust, the denser oceanic crust loses. It bends downward and slides beneath the continent in a process called subduction, descending back into the mantle at an angle, carrying with it the sediments that have accumulated on the ocean floor, the water absorbed into the rock, everything the crust has collected during its time at the surface. This descent is not smooth or silent. The oceanic plate bends under enormous stress as it begins its subduction, and that stress releases in earthquakes. Some of the largest earthquakes on Earth occur along the subduction zones that ring the Pacific, and the water carried down with the subducting plate lowers the melting point of the mantle rock above it, generating magma that rises through the overlying continental crust and erupts as volcanoes. The result is the volcanic arc, the chain of active volcanoes that parallels the subduction zone, set back from the coast by the distance the plate has travelled before generating the magma that reaches the surface. Around the entire rim of the Pacific, this process is running simultaneously. Subduction zones consuming the ocean floor, volcanoes erupting above them, earthquakes releasing the accumulated stress, The Pacific Ring of Fire, the arc of seismic and volcanic activity that traces the ocean's edges from New Zealand up through the Philippines, Japan, the Aleutian Islands, so down the west coast of the Americas to the tip of Chile, is the surface expression of one of the most active geological systems on the planet. Approximately 90% of all earthquakes on Earth occur along the Ring of Fire. Approximately 75% of all active volcanoes on land are part of it. The floor of the Pacific itself is being created at the same time it is being destroyed. At the East Pacific Rise, the mid-ocean ridge that runs roughly parallel to the west coast of South America, tectonic plates are spreading apart, and new oceanic crust is being generated from magma rising from the mantle below. This process of seafloor spreading, first proposed by Harry Hess in 1960 and confirmed by the pattern of magnetic stripes preserved in the ocean floor, is one of the central mechanisms of plate tectonics. As the Pacific floor moves from the ridge where it is born to the subduction zone where it is consumed, carrying everything on it, including the sediment record of millions of years of ocean history, down into the mantle where it is recycled. The Pacific, in other words, is not fixed. It is not an inert basin holding water. It is an active, moving, breathing geological system that has been creating and destroying itself continuously for longer than complex life has existed on Earth. The ground beneath the ocean is moving tonight by a few centimeters in the dark, as it has moved every night for 200 million years. And the ocean above it rests on this slow motion, unbothered, vast and dark and deep, as it has always rested on whatever the earth beneath it decided to do. Far beneath the surface of the central Pacific, in a place where the seafloor should by rights be flat and featureless, ancient ocean floor, far from any plate boundary, far from any obvious source of geological activity, the rock is melting, not because of plate tectonics, not because of subduction or seafloor spreading, or any of the mechanisms we described in the last chapter. The rock is melting because of a hotspot, a plume of anomalously hot mantle material rising from deep in the earth, possibly from the boundary between the mantle and the core, pushing upward through the overlying plate and generating magma that has nowhere to go except up. This is how Hawaii was made. The Hawaiian hotspot has been in roughly the same position relative to the deep Earth for at least 80 million years. The Pacific plate, moving slowly to the northwest at about 7 centimeters per year, it passes over this stationary hotspot the way a piece of paper passes over a candle flame. The flame stays in one place, and the paper, moving, is burned in a sequence of spots that traces its path. The Hawaiian island chain is that sequence of spots. The oldest islands, now submerged seamounts and coral atolls far to the northwest, were the first to form over the hotspot and have been carried away from it by the plate's movement. The youngest, the Big Island of Hawaii, where Kilauea has been erupting almost continuously since 1983, is directly over the hotspot right now, still being built. Hawaii is, by one measure, the most isolated archipelago on Earth. The nearest continent is thousands of kilometers away in any direction. The nearest group of islands of any significant size is over 3,000 kilometers distant, and the species that colonized Hawaii before human arrival, the birds, the insects, the plants, arrived on an island that had emerged from the sea with nothing living on it, crossing open ocean distances that should have made colonization vanishingly improbable. And yet, they came, carried by wind and current, and the sheer statistical weight of enough time passing that even very unlikely events happen eventually. The Hawaiian honey creepers, over 50 species of bird, all descended from a single ancestral finch that arrived from North America millions of years ago, are what happens when an isolated lineage has millions of years and a variety of ecological niches to evolve into. The Big Island is the youngest of the Hawaiian Islands, but already impressive enough. Over 4,000 meters from the ocean floor to its summit, larger in volume than any mountain on land. And it is still growing. Every eruption adds new rock to its shores. Lava reaching the ocean in slow flows that steam and crack and cool into new land at the water's edge. The island you can stand on today is larger than it was when the first Polynesian navigators arrived 1,000 years ago. It is larger than it was last year, but Hawaii is only the most visible part of a much larger story. Beneath the surface of the Pacific, the ocean floor is not flat. It is mountains, thousands of them, seamounts, the submerged volcanic mountains, built by the same hotspot process and by other volcanic mechanisms, rising from the abyssal plain in peaks that sometimes reach within a few hundred meters of the surface. Most of the Pacific's seamounts have never been visited, never been mapped in detail, never had a camera pointed at their slopes. Their ecosystems, cold water coral communities, fish assemblages specific to the seamount environment, invertebrate communities found nowhere on the flat seafloor around them, are almost entirely unknown. The Pacific is full of mountains that no one has ever seen, rising in the dark, in the deep, from a seafloor that has been building and moving and building again since long before the first human eye looked out at the water above them. The ocean floor is not empty space below the water. It is a landscape, and most of it has never been looked at. On a calm night in the open Pacific, far from any coast, the surface of the ocean in still air is close to silence. Not complete silence. Complete silence does not exist at the surface of any ocean, but a particular quality of quiet that people who have spent time on small boats far out in the open Pacific describe in similar terms across many different accounts. A low, continuous sound that is neither wave nor wind, but something between them. The sound of the ocean breathing through its own surface. The minute movement of water molecules exchanging with the air. The occasional deep, resonant pulse of a swell passing beneath the hull that you feel more than hear. A sound that is there when you are still and paying attention, and not there when you are not. The Pacific in calm is one of the quietest places accessible to a human being. But go below the surface, and the quiet changes entirely. The ocean is not a silent place. It is one of the noisiest environments on Earth, an acoustic world of extraordinary complexity, full of sounds that travel faster and further than sound travels through air, sounds that carry information across distances no land animal could ever match. Sound moves through seawater at approximately 1,500 meters per second, more than 4 times faster than through air. And in the deep ocean, there is a layer, typically between 600 and 900 meters depth, though it varies, where the combination of temperature and pressure creates conditions that trap sound waves and channel them horizontally for enormous distances. This layer is called the SOFAR channel, the sound fixing and ranging channel. And it is one of the ocean's most remarkable acoustic features. Sound that enters the SOFAR channel does not spread outward in all directions the way sound in open water or open air does. It bends back toward the channel's axis whenever it strays above or below it, staying trapped, traveling horizontally, losing very little energy to the water around it. A sound made in the SOFAR channel can travel thousands of kilometers with enough intensity to be detected by a sensitive hydrophone on the other side of the ocean. During the Cold War, the American and Soviet navies both placed hydrophone arrays in the deep Pacific to listen to the SOFAR channel for enemy submarines. What those arrays detected, in addition to the submarines they were built to find, was the sound of the ocean itself. Whales, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, storms, the groan and crack of shifting ice. An acoustic portrait of the planet's oceans that researchers are still working to fully understand. The blue whale uses the SOFAR channel, or its calls, the lowest frequency vocalizations of any animal on Earth, between 10 and 40 Hz, below the threshold of human hearing or at its very edge, travel in the SOFAR channel at an intensity that allows them to be detected hundreds and perhaps thousands of kilometers from the calling animal. Blue whales communicate across ocean basins. A whale calling in the Central Pacific may be heard by another whale near Japan, or near Alaska, or near the coast of California. The ocean is, for the blue whale, a single acoustic space. The animal does not experience the Pacific as divided into regions the way a human map divides it. It experiences it as one continuous place, navigable by sound, known by sound, communicated across by sound. The sound of a blue whale call, slowed down to a frequency humans can hear, is one of the most extraordinary sounds the natural world produces. A deep, complex, moaning call that lasts for 10 to 30 seconds and carries more information in its structure than a simple location signal. Blue whale populations have different dialects. Animals in the North Pacific call differently from animals in the South Pacific, and those populations have their own regional variations within them. The songs are learned and evolve over time, slowly changing in frequency and structure across years and decades as the population's acoustic culture shifts. Tonight, somewhere in the Pacific, a blue whale is calling. The sound is traveling through the SOFAR channel right now, moving at 1,500 meters per second through the cold, dark water, reaching toward another animal somewhere in the vast blue dark who is listening. And the ocean is not quiet. It is only quiet to us. The Pacific does not simply hold water. It moves things. At the surface, the Great Gyres, the North Pacific Gyre and the South Pacific Gyre, enormous slow-turning circles of current driven by the trade winds and the westerlies and deflected into rotation by the spinning of the Earth, carry floating material across the ocean in arcs that span thousands of kilometers and take years to complete. Anything that enters the surface of the Pacific is carried. Seeds encased in tough, buoyant husks. Driftwood from forests that fell into rivers and were carried to the sea. The eggs of fish attached to floating kelp. Pumice rafts from underwater volcanic eruptions, supporting temporary communities of hitchhiking invertebrates, crossing the ocean on a floating island of volcanic glass. Everything the ocean surface receives, the gyres eventually carry somewhere. This is how life colonized the Pacific Islands. The coconut palm, so completely associated with tropical Pacific Islands that it is almost inseparable from the image of them, spread itself across the Pacific on currents. The coconut fruit is a masterwork of buoyant packaging, a large, sealed, air-containing husk surrounding a nutritious seed, with enough energy stored inside it to germinate and establish on a new shore without any soil preparation. Coconuts float. They float for months. They tolerate salt water. They can cross thousands of kilometers of open ocean and arrive at a beach in viable condition. The Pacific Island coconut groves were planted by the ocean itself, so over thousands of years of currents carrying seeds from island to island in slow arcs that no individual seed would have been aware of, but that, accumulated across millions of seeds and millions of years, produced a distribution of palms across the whole Pacific basin. The same currents carried the ancestors of the land birds, the insects, the lizards, and eventually the plants that colonized every volcanic island as it emerged from the sea. The ocean that seems to isolate islands from each other is also the mechanism that connects them. The water that makes the gap is also the road, and the gyres carry human history too. Archaeological evidence suggests that sweet potato, a plant native to South America, was being cultivated in Polynesia before European contact, centuries before any European ship had connected the two regions. At the most compelling explanation is direct contact between Polynesian navigators and South American populations. The navigators bringing the plant back across the Pacific to their home islands. But there is another possibility, not mutually exclusive. The sweet potato, or its seeds, could have been carried across the Pacific on the South Pacific Gyre. The current runs from South America westward toward Polynesia. The distance is enormous, but the ocean is patient, and the gyre runs continuously. In the late 1940s, Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl set out to demonstrate that ancient peoples could have crossed the Pacific on simple balsa wood rafts, traveling with the current. His raft, the Kon-Tiki, left Peru and arrived in Polynesia 101 days later, carried almost entirely by the South Equatorial Current. He did not prove that the contact happened. Archaeology has since shown that Polynesian navigation was the primary mechanism for Pacific crossings. But he proved something important about the ocean, that the currents, given time and the right vessel, do the work. The Pacific does not just separate, it connects. In the North Pacific Gyre today, there is an accumulation of plastic debris, fragments of broken down plastic objects carried from coastlines around the Pacific Rim by the rivers and currents that feed the gyre, concentrated by the slow rotation into a region of elevated plastic density, sometimes called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It is not a solid island of plastic, as it is sometimes pictured in popular accounts. It is a diffuse, deep accumulation of small fragments, microplastics, some smaller than a grain of rice, spread across an area larger than the state of Texas, invisible from the surface, but detectable in the water column. The same current that carried coconut palms and sweet potato seeds and the logs of ancient forests now carries this. The ocean carries everything we give it. The gyre keeps turning, unhurried, enormous, carrying whatever floats. It has always turned this way. The question is only what we choose to put on the water. 3,000 years ago, a group of people launched canoes into the Pacific Ocean and sailed east into a horizon that held nothing they had ever seen. No landmarks, no islands within sight, no GPS, no compass, no sextant, no chart of any kind in the form we would recognize as a chart. Only the ocean, the sky, the stars, the feel of the swell beneath the hull, and a body of knowledge so deep and so precise that it allowed them to cross the largest ocean on Earth, find islands the size of specks in an immensity of water, and return home to tell others where those islands were. This is the greatest navigation achievement in human history, and it is still not fully understood. The Polynesian expansion across the Pacific, from the islands of Western Polynesia outward to Hawaii in the north, Easter Island in the east, and New Zealand in the south, over the course of roughly 1,000 years, ending around 1300 CE, required the repeated, intentional, successful crossing of open ocean distances that dwarfed anything being attempted by any other seafaring culture at the same time. Yet while European navigators were still hugging coastlines and making short island hops across the Mediterranean and the northern Atlantic, Polynesian wayfinders were crossing 3,000 kilometers of open Pacific with enough precision to find islands they had been told about but never seen, and enough reliability that the same routes were sailed repeatedly, that trade networks and communication between island groups thousands of kilometers apart were maintained for generations. The knowledge that made this possible was not written down. It lived in the body, the memory, the practice of the navigators who carried it. The stars were the most fundamental reference. Polynesian navigators memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars. Not the positions of stars in the sky at a fixed moment, but the precise point on the horizon where each star rose and set over the course of the year. Since stars rise and set at consistent compass points, a given star always rises from the same bearing, always sets at the same bearing. A navigator who knew which star to follow to reach a given destination could hold a course at night with extraordinary accuracy, simply by keeping the appropriate star at the appropriate point on the bow. But the stars were only one instrument in a much larger system. The ocean swells, the long, low waves generated by distant weather systems and traveling across the Pacific in consistent directions regardless of local wind conditions, provided a reference that worked even when clouds covered the sky. An experienced navigator could feel the direction of the dominant swell through the hull of the canoe, through the motion of the vessel, through, according to some accounts, lying on the deck and feeling the swell through the body rather than through any more distant sensor. The swell doesn't change when the stars disappear. It is there in the dark, in the rain, in the fog, as reliable as anything the ocean offers. Clouds over islands before the island itself is visible. Birds whose daily flight patterns revealed the direction of land. The colour and temperature of the water, changing as upwelling currents approached a coast. Phosphorescence at night, brighter in certain water types. The smell of land, of vegetation, of fresh water in the rain that fell on islands and ran into the sea. Each one a layer of information that the trained navigator read continuously, so integrating dozens of signals simultaneously into a constantly updated picture of position and direction. The navigator, Ben Finney, who helped build and sail the Hokulea, a reconstructed traditional Hawaiian double-hulled voyaging canoe, described the experience of traditional Pacific navigation as total immersion in the ocean environment. Not looking at instruments, not consulting charts, but reading the ocean the way a musician reads music, fluently, completely, with the whole body engaged. The Pacific was not a barrier to these people. It was a road they knew better than we know our own cities. It carried them home, every time, across 3,000 kilometers of open water, in the dark. by feel. The ocean remembered them, and they remembered the ocean. Off the western coast of South America, where the Andes drop steeply into the Pacific, something remarkable happens in the ocean just offshore. The wind blows north along this coast, a persistent, consistent wind driven by the pressure systems that sit over the eastern Pacific. And as it blows, it pushes the surface water away from the coast. The Coriolis effect, the deflection produced by the rotation of the Earth, bends this movement to the left in the southern hemisphere, carrying the surface water westward and away from the shore. And as the surface water leaves, something must replace it. What replaces it comes from below. Cold, dark, nutrient-dense water from depths of 200 to 400 meters wells up along the coast of Peru and Chile, rising to replace the surface water that the wind has carried away. And this upwelling brings with it everything the deep water has accumulated on its long journey through the dark. Nitrogen, phosphorus, silica, iron, the chemical building blocks that phytoplankton need to grow. When this cold, rich water reaches the sunlit surface, the phytoplankton respond with a bloom of extraordinary intensity. And on that bloom, the entire food web of the Eastern Pacific builds itself, layer by layer, in one of the most productive marine ecosystems anywhere on Earth. The anchoveta, a small silver fish, not much longer than a finger, feeds on the phytoplankton and the zooplankton that feed on the phytoplankton, and exists in the Humboldt Current ecosystem in numbers so vast they are difficult to express. Hundreds of millions of tons of anchoveta, schools so dense that sonar cannot penetrate them. So the anchoveta is the link between the ocean's chemistry and everything above it in the food web, the foundation on which all the visible, dramatic life of the Humboldt Current is built. Above the anchoveta come the larger fish, jack mackerel, bonito, the larger predators, and above them, the animals that make this coast one of the great wildlife spectacles on Earth. Hundreds of thousands of Humboldt penguins, breeding on the rocky islands and headlands of the Peruvian coast, and feeding in the cold water just offshore. Sea lions hauled out on every available surface, their bodies gleaming wet in the sun, their noise carrying across the water in a continuous social roar. Boobies and cormorants and pelicans in colonies of tens of thousands. The air above the nesting islands thick with birds, or the sea below them boiling with the fish they plunge dive to catch. And the whales. The Humboldt Current is feeding grounds for blue whales, humpbacks, sperm whales, fin whales, the largest animals on Earth, drawn to these waters by the sheer abundance of what the upwelling makes possible. A blue whale needs up to 4 tons of krill and small fish per day to sustain itself. The Humboldt Current, in productive years, can provide this. The whales arrive from their breeding grounds in warmer waters, feed through the productive months, and depart again when the upwelling weakens seasonally. The ocean provides, and the animals time their lives to the ocean's provision. All of this, the penguins, the sea lions, the whales, the billions of anchoveta, the seabird colonies, the entire extraordinary abundance, runs on cold water rising. On the deep Pacific, releasing its nutrients to the surface. On the wind, pushing the surface away so that the deep can come up. 3 forces: chemistry, circulation, wind, and their interaction produces one of the greatest concentrations of life on the planet. The cold water arrives at the surface in silence, invisible, carrying no announcement of what it will become. And then the fish come, and then the birds, and then the whales. The ocean provides, as it has always provided, through mechanisms so basic they require no management and no design. Wind, water, chemistry, depth. The oldest equation in the sea. In 1989, a team of scientists monitoring a network of hydrophones in the North Pacific detected a signal they could not immediately identify. It was a whale call. That much was clear from its general structure. The slow, sweeping frequency pattern characteristic of the large baleen whales. But it was unlike any whale call previously recorded. Where blue whales in the North Pacific call at frequencies between 10 and 40 Hz, this signal was at 52 Hz. Significantly higher, so high that it fell outside the known calling range of any baleen whale species. The team documented it, noted its unusual frequency, and filed it away. The signal appeared again the following year, and the year after that, and every year since, tracked by the hydrophone networks that the United States Navy had originally built to detect submarines, repurposed after the Cold War for oceanographic research. Each year, the same voice, the same 52 Hz frequency, the same general call structure, so moving through the Pacific on a path that broadly resembled the migration routes of blue and fin whales. The call was clearly from a single animal. The call was clearly from an animal that was alive and moving and apparently healthy, returning season after season to the same general regions of the North Pacific. No other animal ever answered it. The 52 Hz whale, as it came to be known, calls at a frequency that sits in the gap between the calling ranges of different whale species. Blue whales cannot hear it as a blue whale call. Fin whales, which call at around 20 Hz, cannot hear it in the frequency range where they listen for their own kind. If the animal is a blue whale, or a hybrid between a blue and a fin whale, or a malformed individual with an anomalous vocal apparatus, it is calling into a frequency range where no other animal of its kind is listening. It has been calling for over 30 years. The ocean is full of sound, as we described in Chapter 9, but most of that sound is not communication, in the sense of a message sent and a response expected. Most of it is the physical acoustic environment of the water, the groaning of tectonic plates, the crackling of shrimp colonies, the noise of rain on the surface, the low-frequency thunder of distant storms. Within this constant acoustic background, the whale songs are structured, repeated, individually consistent signals that carry information. The blue whale's calls are loud enough, the loudest sounds produced by any animal, to be detected hundreds of kilometers away. They are complex enough to carry identity and location, and they are consistent enough year to year that individual animals have been tracked across ocean basins by their acoustic signatures alone. What the whales are communicating remains partially understood and partially mysterious. Contact calls, announcing presence and location, reproductive displays, the complex long songs of humpback males broadcast through the SOFAR channel to competing and receptive animals across enormous distances, navigation signals, possibly, though this remains debated. The structure of whale song is not simple. Humpback whale songs change year by year across a population in a pattern that resembles cultural evolution. New phrases appearing, old ones dropping out, and the change spreading from one animal to the next across the population in a wave that can be tracked moving across the Pacific Basin from west to east over the course of a few years. The ocean carries all of this. Every call, every song, every low-frequency pulse, entering the SOFAR channel and traveling. A blue whale calling off the coast of California may be detectable by hydrophones near Japan. The Pacific is not too large for sound. Sound is what the Pacific carries best. Tonight, the water is carrying voices. Enormous, ancient, unhurried voices moving through the dark at 1,500 meters per second. Most of them finding answers. One of them, 52 hertz, alone in its frequency, patient across 3 decades. Still waiting, still calling, still out there. Every few years, the Pacific changes its mind. Not all of it, and not suddenly. The change is slow and ocean-wide, and involves the interaction of 2 of the most powerful systems on Earth, the ocean and the atmosphere, each responding to the other in a feedback loop so large and so complex that predicting its behavior is one of the most difficult problems in climate science. The event this produces is called El Niño, and its effects extend far beyond the Pacific, reaching into the weather of every continent on Earth. Under normal conditions, the trade winds blow westward across the tropical Pacific, from the high pressure zone over the eastern Pacific toward the lower pressure over the warmer western Pacific near Australia and Indonesia. These winds push warm surface water westward, piling it up in the western Pacific, where sea surface temperatures are highest. The eastern Pacific, meanwhile, the coast of South America, is left with the cool upwelling we described in the last chapter. Cold, nutrient-rich water rising to the surface and feeding the extraordinary abundance of the Humboldt Current. Then, for reasons that scientists understand in broad terms, but cannot yet predict precisely, the trade winds weaken. Sometimes they reverse entirely, blowing eastward instead of west. The warm water that the trades had been holding in the western Pacific sloshes back eastward, like water in a tilted bowl returning to level when the tilt relaxes. A wave of warm water, not a surface wave, but a deep, ocean-wide pulse of heat, moves across the Pacific from west to east over a period of weeks to months. When it arrives at the South American coast, it suppresses the upwelling. The cold, nutrient-rich water can no longer reach the surface through the lid of warm water sitting on top of it. The Humboldt Current collapses. The anchoveta disappear from the surface. The sea lions and penguins and seabirds that built their lives around the certainty of cold, productive water find nothing where the food should be. Seabird colonies fail to breed. Sea lion pups starve when their mothers cannot find fish within foraging range of the colony. The Peruvian fishing industry, which at its peak has been the most productive single fishery in the world, crashes. The effects on local human communities are severe and immediate, but El Niño extends far beyond the Pacific coast of South America, and the shift in where the ocean releases its heat to the atmosphere, from the western Pacific to the central and eastern Pacific, reorganizes the entire global atmospheric circulation. The jet streams shift, the monsoons change, regions that normally receive abundant rainfall become dry, regions normally dry become wet. Australia and Indonesia experience drought when El Niño is strong. East Africa and the southwestern United States receive unusual rainfall. The Indian monsoon weakens. Hurricanes in the Atlantic become less frequent, while typhoons shift their tracks in the Pacific. All of this from a change in the temperature of a portion of the Pacific surface. The ocean stores an almost incomprehensible amount of heat. The top few meters of the Pacific contains more thermal energy than the entire atmosphere above it. And when the Pacific decides to release some of that heat into the air, when the trade winds relax and the warm pool moves east, and the ocean and the atmosphere begin their complex planet-wide conversation, the entire global weather system shifts in response. The event lasts roughly 9 to 12 months, sometimes longer. Then, often through a swing to the opposite condition, La Niña, when the trade winds strengthen and the cold upwelling intensifies beyond its normal state, the Pacific returns toward equilibrium. The trade winds re-establish. The warm pool drifts back west. The upwelling resumes. The anchoveta return. The sea lions feed their pups. The Pacific breathes out. And the world, which had been holding its breath with it, exhales. The ocean is not a backdrop to the climate. It is the climate's memory, its heat sink, its regulator. The weather you woke up to this morning was shaped, in part, by what the Pacific decided to do with its warmth. It does not ask permission. It simply does what oceans do: hold the heat, release the heat, and let the world respond. In 1977, a team of geologists descended in the submersible Alvin to the floor of the Galapagos Rift, a section of mid-ocean ridge in the eastern Pacific, expecting to find what mid-ocean ridge floors always looked like: cold, dark, barren, the geological equivalent of a desert, bare basalt, a little sediment, almost nothing alive. What they found instead changed biology permanently. At a depth of around 2.5 kilometers, in water close to freezing in every direction, except directly above the seafloor vents they were approaching, there was life. Not sparse life, extraordinary, dense, abundant life, clustered around the vents in communities of a complexity and biomass that no one had predicted, and no existing theory could explain. Giant tube worms, nearly 3 meters long, their white tubes anchored to the basalt, and their feathery red plumes extended into the warm vent water. Clams the size of dinner plates, mats of white bacteria covering every surface near the vents. Crabs, shrimp, fish, a whole ecosystem, thriving in total darkness, at pressures that should have made complex life impossible, fed by no sunlight, connected to no photosynthetic food chain. These communities were running on chemistry rather than light. At the hydrothermal vents, seawater seeps down through cracks in the basalt, is superheated by the magma below, and returns to the seafloor carrying dissolved minerals and chemical compounds, particularly hydrogen sulfide, that the surface ocean never sees in these concentrations. Certain bacteria can use hydrogen sulfide as an energy source in a process called chemosynthesis, analogous to photosynthesis, but requiring no light. These bacteria are the base of the vent food web, just as phytoplankton are the base of the surface food web. Everything else in the vent community, the tube worms, the clams, the shrimp, depends directly or indirectly on the chemosynthetic bacteria, and through them on the chemical energy rising from the Earth's interior. Life without the sun, a complete, functioning ecosystem sustained by the heat of the planet itself. This discovery fundamentally changed the way scientists think about where life can exist, not just on Earth, but anywhere in the universe. Before 1977, the sun was considered the non-negotiable prerequisite for complex life. Photosynthesis at the base of every food web, light the ultimate energy source for all biological productivity. After 1977, that requirement dissolved. Life needs energy, The sun is one source of energy. The interior heat of a rocky planet is another. Any world that has liquid water and geological activity producing chemical gradients, volcanically active moons, subsurface oceans on icy bodies in the outer solar system, became, overnight, a candidate for life. Since 1977, hundreds of hydrothermal vent systems have been identified across the mid-ocean ridge network of the Pacific and other oceans. Each one supports its own community, with species compositions that vary between vent fields, and suggesting that vent communities evolve in relative isolation over the geological timescale of each vent's active life. When a vent stops, the community it sustained disappears. When a new vent opens, colonists arrive from somewhere. Larvae carried by the deep currents, settling on fresh basalt and beginning a new community from scratch. Most of the Pacific seafloor, including most of the vent systems, has never been seen by a human eye or a camera. The Pacific covers 165 million square kilometers. The total area surveyed by any kind of seafloor imaging is a small fraction of this. The deep Pacific floor is less mapped than the surface of Mars, and what has been mapped in far less detail. At the creatures living in the dark below the Pacific right now, the animals feeding at vents that have not been discovered, the species in the deep sediment that have never been described, the chemosynthetic ecosystems running on geological heat in places no submersible has reached, are almost entirely unknown. The Pacific keeps its deepest secrets in the deepest dark, in the cold, in the pressure, in the complete absence of sunlight. Life going on as it has gone on for billions of years, in places the surface world knows nothing about. The darkness of the deep is not emptiness. It never was. The surface of the Pacific is not empty. It looks empty from a boat or a shore or a satellite image, an expanse of open water with nothing visible, nothing breaking the surface, nothing to indicate that anything is happening between the sky and the deep. But the surface ocean is one of the most densely populated environments on Earth, measured not by the animals you can see, but by the organisms too small to see. The invisible engine that runs everything, phytoplankton, single-celled mostly, some equipped with tiny whip-like tails that allow a small degree of self-propulsion, others fixed in place within glass shells of extraordinary geometric complexity. The diatoms, whose silica frustules come in shapes that look like they were designed by an obsessive mathematician working at nanometer scales. Still others forming long chains, or colonial clusters, or motile spirals. Several thousand species in the Pacific alone, each occupying a slightly different chemical and physical niche in the surface water, nor collectively covering the ocean in a layer of photosynthetic life, invisible to the naked eye, but detectable from space as variations in the color of the surface. The greens and blue-greens of phytoplankton chlorophyll, photographed by ocean monitoring satellites. These organisms produce approximately half of the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. Not a small fraction, not a supplementary contribution. Half. Every second breath you take was made by something too small to see, in an ocean you may never visit, doing what it has been doing for 2 billion years before the first plant grew on land. The phytoplankton are eaten by zooplankton, the animal plankton, equally small, equally varied, equally invisible in the water, but present in numbers that make the word enormous seem inadequate. Copepods, tiny crustaceans, most less than a millimeter long, are perhaps the most abundant multicellular animals on Earth. The Pacific is full of them, grazing the phytoplankton, converting plant material into animal material, making themselves available to the fish and the squid and the jellyfish and the whales that eat them in turn. At the surface, in the warm subtropical gyres, there are the drifters, the animals that move with the water rather than through it. The Portuguese man-o'-war, not a jellyfish, but a colonial organism, a siphonophore, its gas-filled float riding the surface while its tentacles hang meters below, trailing through the plankton layer and catching anything that blunders into them. The by-the-wind sailor, Velella velella, another colonial organism, a disc of living tissue with a stiff diagonal sail that catches the wind and drives the animal across the surface in vast fleets, millions of them in the subtropical Pacific, all sailing before the same wind, all going wherever the wind decides to take them. They have no means of changing course. They sail with absolute confidence in a direction they do not choose. And the jellyfish, the Pacific moon jellyfish, pulsing through the surface layer in slow rhythmic contractions, their translucent bells gathering plankton on trailing oral arms. The Pacific lion's mane, among the largest, its bell reaching a meter across and its tentacles trailing 30 meters below in a curtain of stinging threads. The bi-blue button, a colonial organism so small and so flat it lies like a disc on the surface, its underside blue against the blue of the water, disappearing into the colour of the ocean from below and glowing iridescent when light hits it from above. The surface of the Pacific, looked at with the right instruments, from the right angle, at the right scale, is impossibly full of life. The air above it smells of dimethyl sulfide, a compound produced by phytoplankton as a metabolic byproduct, the chemical that gives the ocean its particular smell, the smell that the brain of any person who has lived near the sea registers as the smell of the ocean itself. It is the smell of photosynthesis, the smell of invisible life working at the surface, making oxygen, feeding the food web, connecting the ocean to the atmosphere in a continuous chemical exchange that has been running for 2 billion years. You are breathing it right now, if you are near enough. Even if you are not, it got into you somewhere. The ocean always does. Coral is not a plant. It is not a rock. It is an animal. This still surprises people, even people who have snorkeled above a reef and looked down at the extraordinary complexity of colour and structure below them. The brain files coral automatically with the category of things that grow from the seafloor in fixed shapes. And in this, coral does resemble a plant, or a rock formation, more than it resembles the sea anemone it is actually closely related to. But each coral structure, however large, is built by animals, by individual polyps, most of them only a few millimeters in diameter, each one a small cylinder of soft tissue with a ring of tentacles at one end, and a mouth in the center. Attached to the calcium carbonate skeleton, it has secreted around itself. The skeleton is what persists. The polyp lives, reproduces, secretes a little more calcium carbonate, and eventually dies, leaving its skeleton behind. New polyps grow on top of old skeletons. Over years and decades and centuries and millennia, the accumulated skeletons of billions of individual animals build the reef structure, branching, mounding, plating, encrusting, in forms that grow at a rate of about 1 to 3 centimeters per year for the faster growing species, and can reach ages of hundreds of years in individual coral colonies and thousands of years in reef structures that are still growing today. The Great Barrier Reef, off the northeast coast of Australia in the Coral Sea on the western edge of the Pacific, is the largest reef system on Earth. It extends for over 2,000 kilometers, covers nearly 350,000 square kilometers of seafloor, and supports more species of fish, coral, mollusk, and marine invertebrate than any other single marine ecosystem. It is large enough to be seen from space. It has been developing in its current form for approximately 20,000 years, since the sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age and flooded the continental shelf to the depth that coral requires. But the Great Barrier Reef, vast as it is part of an even larger network. The Coral Triangle, the area of the Western Pacific bounded by the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and Timor-Leste, contains the highest marine biodiversity on Earth. More species of coral reef fish live in the Coral Triangle than anywhere else in the ocean. More species of coral, more species of marine turtle, of reef shark, of giant clam. The Coral Triangle is the Amazon basin of the ocean, the center of marine diversity, from which species have spread across the Indo-Pacific in both directions, the evolutionary heart of the coral reef world. Inside a coral reef, the scale changes completely. The vast open Pacific, with its distances measured in thousands of kilometers, is replaced by a world measured in centimeters. Every centimeter of available substrate is occupied by something. The spaces in the reef structure are full. Fish of every conceivable color and shape moving through the architecture of the coral. The small ones darting between branches to escape the larger ones, and the large ones cruising in the open water above the reef and dropping back in when opportunity arises. Cleaner wrasse, small fish who make their living removing parasites from the skin and gills of larger fish, set up cleaning stations where grouper and parrotfish and even sharks arrive and hold still, their mouths open, their gill covers spread, waiting to be cleaned. The reef at night is different from the reef by day. The daytime fish retreat into crevices, slow and still. The night shift emerges, the basket stars extending their branching arms into the current to filter plankton. The octopus moving across the coral surface in a slow hunt. The squirrelfish, red in daylight, nearly black in the blue nighttime water, large-eyed and alert in the dark. The reef breathes with the tides, and the current through it changes direction twice daily, bringing fresh plankton and carrying waste away, ventilating the structure the way wind ventilates a forest. An animal built these cathedrals, a millimeter at a time, over thousands of years, not one of them aware of what they were making. From 400 kilometers above the Earth, the Pacific at night is the largest dark place visible from space. The International Space Station completes one orbit of the Earth every 90 minutes. In the course of a single day, it crosses the Pacific dozens of times, and astronauts who have spent time on the station describe the crossing as one of the most striking visual experiences of spaceflight. Not for what is there, but for what is not. Where the land below is threaded with the golden light of cities and roads, where even the most remote parts of the continents show the faint signatures of human activity in the dark, the Pacific is an absence, a vast, unlit, dark, blue-black emptiness that takes minutes to cross even at the station speed of 28,000 kilometers per hour. Minutes at that speed means thousands of kilometers of unlit ocean. No cities, no roads, a few scattered lights from ships, the container vessels crossing the Pacific on their fixed routes, the fishing fleets working the productive waters near the coasts, but so few and spaced so far apart that the dominant impression is of a world without people, a piece of the planet's surface where the human mark on the night is almost invisible. Almost, because on certain nights, in certain regions of the Pacific, the darkness at the surface is not complete. There are areas where the ocean surface itself produces light. Bioluminescent phytoplankton, specifically the dinoflagellates, single-celled organisms that produce a brief flash of blue-green light when physically disturbed, sometimes bloom to densities high enough that any disturbance of the water surface, any wave or wake or movement, produces visible light. A ship moving through a dinoflagellate bloom leaves a glowing wake behind it, visible from above. A wave breaking on a beach at night lights up in blue-green fire along its entire breaking face. Dolphins and fish moving through a dense bloom leave luminous trails that hang in the water for seconds after the animal has passed, visible from a low orbit as faint moving streaks of blue-green light on a dark ocean surface. From the space station, a large bioluminescent bloom is visible as a faint, diffuse glow, a soft blue-green area on the dark surface of the Pacific, shifting and unsteady, unlike the fixed sharp grid of a city's lights. Astronauts have photographed and described these blooms from orbit. They are one of the few places where biological activity at the ocean surface is directly visible from space with the naked eye, without instruments. But the astronaut's view of the Pacific is also a view of something that most people who live near the ocean never experience. The Pacific in its full extent, seen all at once. From 400 kilometers up, the curvature of the Earth is clearly visible, and the Pacific takes up so much of the visible disk below that the station can cross through an entire view of the Pacific, from the Asian coast disappearing over one horizon to the American coast appearing over the other, and see almost nothing but ocean. The planet, seen from this angle, looks less like a planet with ocean on it, and more like an ocean with some land scattered in it. The Pacific is not a feature of the Earth. The Pacific is most of the Earth's surface. From low orbit, crossing over it in the dark, the astronaut can see the stars reflected in the water on a clear, calm night. The ocean surface acting as a mirror so large and so dark that it duplicates the sky above it. Stars above, stars below, and the station moving between them through the dark. The ocean and the sky, holding the same light between them. At the Pacific at night, seen from above, is not the absence of something. It is the presence of everything that was here before us. Still here, still dark, still vast, completely indifferent to whether anyone is watching, and more beautiful for it. On the floor of the Pacific, under kilometers of water and centuries of accumulated sediment, the ocean keeps a record. It is one of the most complete records of Earth's climate history that exists anywhere on the planet. More continuous, in some respects, than the ice cores drilled from Greenland and Antarctica. More detailed in others than the rock record preserved in the walls of canyons and sea cliffs. The sediment that accumulates on the Pacific seafloor does so slowly, a few centimeters every 1,000 years in the open ocean. And it accumulates in layers, each layer representing a period of time, each layer carrying within it the chemical and biological signatures of the ocean conditions during which it was deposited. To read this record, scientists lower a coring device from a research ship, a weighted tube, sometimes 10 or 20 meters long, driven into the sediment by its own weight when it hits the seafloor. What comes back up in the core is a column of sediment laid down over hundreds of thousands of years, the layers intact, the oldest material at the bottom and the youngest at the top, preserved in the cold and pressure of the deep ocean floor exactly as it was deposited. The shells of foraminifera, microscopic single-celled organisms that build calcium carbonate shells and are among the most abundant organisms in the ocean, are particularly useful. When a foraminifera builds its shell, the ratio of different oxygen isotopes incorporated into the calcium carbonate reflects the temperature of the water in which it is living. Colder water incorporates more of the heavier isotope, oxygen 18. Warmer water incorporates relatively more of the lighter isotope, oxygen 16. The shell, when it is preserved in the sediment after the organism's death, carries this temperature signal permanently. By measuring the oxygen isotope ratios in foraminifera shells at every level of a sediment core, scientists can reconstruct the ocean temperature at that location, going back hundreds of thousands of years. Layer by layer, millennium by millennium, ice age by warm period by ice age. In the same sediment, the remains of other organisms carry other information. Methesilicon shells of diatoms indicate productivity levels in the surface ocean above. More diatoms, more productive. The pollen of land plants, carried to the ocean by wind, reflects the vegetation of nearby continents. What forests and grasslands existed, how they changed as the climate shifted. Tiny fragments of volcanic glass from eruptions record the timing and intensity of volcanic events. Iron-rich dust from the continents, blown to the Pacific by wind, records periods of drought and desiccation on the landmasses upwind. The sediment core is a library. Every centimetre is a chapter. The further you go down, the further back you read. Into the ice ages that covered the continents in ice sheets kilometres thick, into the warm interglacials between them, into periods of climate different from anything in human memory. And the Pacific seafloor holds records going back millions of years. Deep enough in the sediment, in cores from the right locations, preserved through good fortune and the cold and the pressure, there are chapters written before the first human ancestor walked on land. The record is not perfect. Sediment can be disturbed by deep currents or by bottom-dwelling animals that mix the layers. Some periods are better preserved than others. Some chemical signals are more reliable than others. But taken as a whole, across hundreds of sediment cores from locations throughout the Pacific, each one calibrated against the others, the gaps in one record filled by another, the picture that emerges is extraordinary. A continuous account of the climate of the Pacific and the Earth, written in chemistry and biology and physics, accumulating one thin layer at a time on the floor of the deepest ocean. The Pacific has been paying attention for a very long time. Everything that has happened above it, every ice age, every warm period, every volcanic eruption that darkened the sky, every drought that stripped a continent of its forests, has been recorded in the sediment below it. The ocean does not forget. It only waits to be asked. The sky above the Pacific is beginning to change. Not quickly. Nothing about the Pacific changes quickly, except the storms, and there is no storm tonight. The change is the slow, reluctant transition from deep dark to the first grey that precedes dawn. A lightning at the eastern edge of the sky that is not yet colour, not yet light in any useful sense. Only the first suggestion that the dark is not permanent, and that the night is beginning, gently and without drama, to give way. The surface of the ocean picks this up before the sky has made any definite commitment to morning. The water, which has been dark and featureless through the night, begins to carry a faint sheen, a dim, directionless brightness that seems to come from everywhere at once, from the sky and the water and the air between them simultaneously. The waves are still moving, as they have moved all night, in the long, slow sets that began as wind somewhere far to the west and have been crossing the Pacific for days. They look different now. The darkness between the swells is no longer absolute. There are shapes in it. Somewhere out on the water, the first birds are moving. The albatross, which has been flying through the night. The wandering albatross can fly for days without landing, riding the updrafts off the wave faces on wings spanning 3.5 meters, sleeping in brief snatches on the water, banks into a long, tilting arc over the grey surface. The black-footed albatross, which nests on the Hawaiian Islands and ranges across the North Pacific, is heading somewhere. The shearwaters, in flocks that can number in the tens of thousands, are already working the surface, their narrow wings angled into the wind, their bodies tilting and banking with the precision of aircraft that have never been to an engineering school. The ocean in these pre-dawn minutes has a quality that belongs to no other time of day. Too dark to be morning, too light to be night, a time between times, when the world has not yet committed to whatever the day is going to be. Sailors who have kept watch through the night know this hour, the last watch, the one before the sun makes the decision. The water in these minutes has a colour that does not have a name, a grey-blue that is colder and quieter than the blue of midday and warmer and less absolute than the black of midnight. We have crossed this ocean tonight. We went to the bottom of Challenger Deep, where the pressure is 1,000 times what it is here at the surface, and found life. We followed the thermohaline circulation through its 1,000-year journey through the dark. We sat inside the Sofar Channel and listened to blue whales communicating across 3,000 kilometers of open water. We stood with the Polynesian navigators as they read the swells and the stars and the temperature of the water, and found their way to islands they had been told about but never seen. We watched the great gyres carry seeds and history and everything the world puts on the water across from one side of the ocean to the other. We went down to the hydrothermal vents and found life running on the heat of the earth itself, without a single photon of sunlight, in the complete dark. The Pacific has been here for 200 million years. It will be here, changing, shrinking, eventually closing, and being replaced by whatever ocean configuration the continuing movement of the tectonic plates produces, for hundreds of millions of years more. What happens on its surface in any given human lifetime is, by the ocean's own measure, in less than the blink of an eye. The problems and the urgencies and the unfinished thoughts of one human day are not nothing, but they are not the Pacific either. The sky is lighter now. The horizon, which was invisible an hour ago in the dark, is a line again. The faint, clean boundary between water and sky, the edge of everything. On the other side of that horizon, the sun is coming. Not yet, but coming. If tonight's journey helped you find your way toward rest, there is one small thing that would mean the world to this channel before you go. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because tomorrow night we will be back with another story built for exactly this hour, for the body that needs something large and quiet to hold on to while it lets the day go. Your place will be here, but for now, the Pacific is doing what it has always done, moving, breathing, carrying everything that floats, holding the cold in its deep and the warm at its surface, and the record of everything that has ever happened in the sediment below. The horizon is brightening, the ocean is still, and the night, which was very large and very full, is softly, slowly giving way. Sleep well.